Hello, we are human beings. Let's rewind and see how we got here. Well, in the beginning, we don't really know what happened. Either everything has always been here, which doesn't make any sense, or nothing created everything, which also doesn't make any sense. Regardless, we have to start somewhere. During the first second of the universe, a lot happened. All the fundamental forces were one, and in 10 to the negative 32 seconds, the universe got 10 to the 26 times bigger. Protons, neutrons, and electrons came together to form atoms. These atoms came together to form molecules, then particles, then dust, then huge clouds of dust. Over the next 100 million years, in the middle of these clouds of dust and gas, matter came together and eventually collapsed under its own weight, causing nuclear fusion, giving birth to the first stars in the universe. Eventually, one of these stars became our sun. The early sun still had a swirling ring of dust and gas, and over time this remaining material came together to form the planets we see today. But let's focus on this one right here. Earth was formed about 4.5 billion years ago and was basically hell. There was no water, no atmosphere, and definitely no life. For the next hundreds of millions of years, Earth is hit by a lot of asteroids and comets. Some of these have water on them, which slowly build Earth's oceans. After this bombardment slowed down, Earth began to cool and rained a lot. The lava lakes hardened into land, and since Earth is still really hot, there were boiling oceans. And at the bottom of these oceans, we don't know exactly how yet, the first life was born. Hello. It was extremely small and simple, but had the ability to make more of itself, so it did. After another few hundred million years, they figured out how to use the sun as energy instead of vents at the bottom of the oceans, also known as photosynthesis. Another billion years later, this caused the atmosphere to become full of oxygen, which helped shield the oceans from harmful UV rays and also gave them another energy source. Another billion years later, these cells decided to start working together and formed the first multicellular organisms. This is when life really started to get its shit together, because in just 60 million years, which isn't that long in the grand scheme of things, there was an explosion in biodiversity, known as the Cambrian explosion. This is when you could really start to notice life on Earth. If you were here during this time, you would see the oceans full of these little alien-looking creatures. But life was still mostly limited to the ocean, because even though the ozone layer was forming, it wasn't strong enough to completely protect life on land. But as life continued to evolve, more oxygen started entering the atmosphere, which caused the ozone layer to become stronger, and it was just strong enough for life to start moving its way onto land. At first, it was really simple things like algae, grass, and small plants that grew on the edge of coastlines. They were used to floating in the ocean, so dealing with gravity on land was a bit difficult. So the first plants developed stronger structures to help fight gravity and stand upright. It took millions of years for larger life forms to follow. But over time, fish-like creatures adapted to breathe in the oxygen and evolved their fins into little limbs to move easier on land. These were called tiktaalics. They were the bridge between life in water and life on land. As they developed stronger spines and slowly became less and less reliant on water, they started to move deeper into land. And after a while, they no longer needed a water source to replicate because of the egg, which then prepared life to spread across the planet. At this point, let's split life into two teams. Team reptiles and the underdogs team mammals. As plant life continued to spread, forests grew, and the atmosphere became full of oxygen. This caused the life on land to evolve and grow to massive sizes. This was known as the Carboniferous period, when giant insects and reptiles thrived. And these reptiles would eventually evolve into the dinosaurs during the Mesozoic era. The dinosaurs were around for a long ass time, over 150 million years, while mammals stayed small and mostly prey. Then, one day, as we all know, an asteroid came and deleted everything. This event caused 75% of all species to be wiped from existence, including the dinosaurs. But team mammals were able to stay underground and outlast the chaos during the colder conditions that followed. And once all the predators were gone and there were no more dinosaurs trying to kill us 24/7, the mammals finally locked in. Over the next several million years, mammals will evolve and become extremely diverse. Some become larger like horses and elephants, others remain small like rodents and rabbits, and there were also cats and wolves and birds and capybaras, etc. And then there were the odd ones, the primates. The first primates arrived only 60 million years ago, and at first glance, there was nothing really special about them. They weren't the biggest, the fastest, the strongest, or anything really. Almost any other animal their size could easily overpower them. The only thing they had was these weird opposable thumbs and slightly larger brains that didn't mean anything when every other animal was hunting them. But those brains would allow them to one day to the story you're hearing right now. 35 to 40 million years ago, the first true monkeys came. They were similar to early primates, but they had more complex brains and behaviors. 5 to 7 million years ago came the first hominids. They were the first to walk on two legs, freeing up their hands for tool making and other stuff with their larger brains. Then, around 2.4 million years ago, the Homo genus was born. This is the beginning of what we are today. Homo habilis was the first to come from the Homo genus, starting in East Africa. They were known for their larger brains and use of simple tools. Homo erectus came shortly after, around 1.9 million years ago. They were the first hominins to move out of Africa into the Middle East, Asia, and parts of Europe. They adapted to different environments and learned how to use fire for cooking, warmth, and protection around 1 million years ago. Some stayed behind in Africa and continued evolving there. Homo heidelbergensis then came around 600,000 years ago from Homo erectus. Those who moved out of Africa developed advanced hunting skills and shelter building to adapt to the colder climates of Europe and Western Asia. They eventually evolved into the Neanderthals around 400,000 years ago. But those who stayed in Africa would eventually become us, Homo sapiens, around 300,000 years ago. These Homo sapiens then evolved into early modern humans, sometimes called Homo sapiens sapiens. And around 70,000 years ago, as we began to move out of Africa, we encountered our evolutionary siblings. Now, the Neanderthals were shorter and stockier than us. They had larger brains, buried their dead, practiced rituals, and had cultures. Yet, 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals disappeared for reasons not fully understood. Maybe it was because of climate change or because we killed them all. Regardless, we lived, leaving us, the Homo sapiens, as the last surviving species of the Homo genus. From that point on, we humans began our rebellion against nature. Roughly 50,000 years ago, the cognitive revolution began. We got better at planning, problem solving, and communicating, and now we could think abstractly, which would over time change the world. We don't know exactly what caused this. Maybe because of food and fire cooking, don't know. But soon, we spread across the world. And as we did, we started to adapt to different environments, and we started to see a difference in skin color, body structures, and cultures. Only around 12,000 years ago did we learn how to plant seeds, starting the agricultural revolution. Before this time, we survived by hunting and gathering, which was really dangerous and only gave us a small amount of food, and meant we had to constantly be moving from place to place. But farming and domesticating of animals allowed us to no longer need to go out and hunt for food, as we can now create a surplus of food in one permanent location. This caused a population boom. With more food means more children are going to be born. These children would then grow up to be workers, producing even more food, repeating the cycle exponentially. And now, since most people no longer need to go out and hunt for food, they could spend more time specializing in other areas of life. Now people can focus on becoming builders and tool makers and teachers. And with more people, some have more power than others, creating a social hierarchy. Now we have homes, and now we have schools, and now we have villages, and now we have cultures and communities, and more food and more time and more people, known as society. And although the human population was growing, around 10 million people at this point, life for people in the past wasn't anything like it is now. Without the technology and the knowledge that we take for granted today, humans were at the mercy of nature. Illness, famine, natural disasters weren't just rare things, but plagued, no pun intended, nearly all civilizations throughout history. It's sometimes easy to think that the world has always been like this, that we can just pull out our phones, order something on Uber Eats or whatever and just have a chill life. But up until recently, it wasn't like that at all. In the past, we didn't understand the forces that shape the world. Our lack of knowledge meant we have no way of knowing the patterns of weather or geological events, or if and when something bad was going to happen. So we naturally gathered around natural bodies of water because it provided easy access to trade in water. But rivers, seas, and oceans were unpredictable. Flash floods killed people, destroyed homes and food, which caused people to go hungry, and increased competition over food, which led to war and violence. Tsunamis wiped out entire coastal communities. Tornadoes and hurricanes came without warning and destroyed what little we've built. Droughts and even simple seasonal changes left the ground useless, which also led to even more starvation. And I can only imagine what they thought earthquakes were. And then there were volcanic eruptions. The Tobo supervolcano erupted around 74,000 years ago and was believed to have caused a global volcanic winter that cooled down the entire planet significantly. And obviously we didn't have AC technology, and we barely knew how to use fire. So this eruption led to widespread famine and may reduce the human population to just 3,000 to 10,000 humans, which put us on the brink of extinction. And events like this are spread all throughout the history of us. These events destroyed everything we've built and forced us to work together and start again, and prove that whatever doesn't kill us simply makes us stronger. We are the descendants of those who walked out of hell. But hell wasn't just made of the things we could see. It was also the world we shared with the things we couldn't. Unlike today, we were stupid. We had absolutely zero idea about the microbial world that existed. This ignorance caused us to live in, for lack of better words, a shitty world. People used to live right next to where they used the bathroom. They used to drink dirty sewer water, often literally eating where they shit. And this lack of knowledge about sanitation and germs caused catastrophic loss of life, wiping out large parts of humanity repeatedly. Like rats and fleas that spread the Black Plague in the 14th century, killing off 60% of Europe's population at the time, which is really crazy to think about. Like, let's say you're in America right now, right? There's around 350-ish million people. If 60% of people were killed by something like that, imagine 200 million people just gone. Anyways, smallpox from cattle caused 300 to 500 million deaths in the 20th century alone, and billions more throughout history. Influenza from pigs, taking another hundreds of millions of lives over time. And malaria from mosquitoes, which is the biggest killer in human history, has estimated to have claimed the lives of over 50 billion of the 100 billion people to ever exist, which is ridiculous. Even if you remove these massive disasters and pandemics, we had to deal with everyday illnesses. Cancer has always existed, same with bacteria, viruses, and colds. Even small things like getting a little cut on your finger could kill you if it got infected. Or sometimes the cures were even worse and could cause you to get a limb removed with a saw without painkillers. If you got sick, the best thing we knew how to do back then was to bleed you or rub more dirt into the womb, which would cause an even greater infection. Not to mention all the other life on Earth that surrounded us. Because remember, while we are really smart and can talk and throw stuff, all we really had up until recently was sharp sticks and rocks. We had animals hunting us on land, like lions, saber-toothed tigers, bears, damn near everything. And in the water, it was worse. There were crocodiles, venomous snakes, sharks, and whatever else is still down there. We even had giant birds that were hunting baby humans at birth, literally spawn camping us. And then there were worms and parasites that can get inside of us and eat us from the inside out. And at some point, someone had to test what foods and plants were safe to eat, which definitely caused a lot of people to die. Our inexperience with fire caused wildfires that burned down everything. Overhunting messed up the food chain and led to food shortages. Even something as simple as making the wrong turn, falling off of a cliff, means you're left there to starve with a broken leg. Or even just a fucking sun that could burn you or give you cancer if you live long enough to get it. And probably a billion other things at all times. Nature is one of those things that's really pretty in pictures and to be in for a short period of time. But when you're stuck out there with just nothing, it becomes scary really fast. But that's how it was back then. And if we weren't fighting nature, then we were fighting ourselves. Because since the agricultural revolution, there's been an explosion of people on Earth. But the more people brought into existence, the more complexities. And the more complexities, the more problems. War and violence has existed since the beginning of man. Invasions and raids were in every civilization in history. If you were weak, you were killed or enslaved by someone stronger than you. Only the fittest survived. On a smaller day-to-day scale, crimes often went unnoticed or unsolved. And if you did get caught or you were accused of something, the early legal systems were a lot more cruel compared to the things we have today. An eye for an eye wasn't just a metaphor, but a very real thing back then. Or getting your hand cut off for theft. The punishments were usually very public and creative, but not in a good way. Human progress relies on growth. And in the past, that growth often came at the cost of others' freedom. Slavery took place in almost every major society in history. If you were born a slave, it was likely all you would ever know. And not just you, but your father. And not just your kids, but your kids' kids into the future. All day, every day. You'd be forced to work 12, 16-hour days of heavy physical labor, literally until it killed you. There was no AC, no rights, no union, no benefits, no vacation time, no freedom. Just that for your entire existence. Gender inequality was also extreme in the past. Your gender dictated your role in life. If you were a man, your value was tied entirely to your ability to provide and protect. If you couldn't, you were a peasant and seen as useless. You had to take the most dangerous jobs, take all the risk for your family, and be the first to lay down your life for your community. If you didn't, you'd be punished, embarrassed, and probably die. If you were a woman, you had protection for men, sure, but you were more or less property. Your primary purpose would be having and raising kids. You often had limited education and were seen as below your husband, who you were often given to. And when you were too old to have kids, your value often went down, leaving you uncared for or forgotten. Regardless of which side you were born to, life wasn't good for most people. Even as a child, the moment you were able to stand and move your hands, you were put to work, and there were no laws or regulations stopping you from harsh work conditions or being exploited. Actually, there's a coin flip you would even have a childhood, as 40 to 50% of humans in the past died before the age of 5. Even if you somehow lived a normal life, you had to deal with corruption. For much of history, oligarchies and monarchies ruled. One family or a small group of people controlled everything. And they were often oppressive rulers, taking all the wealth and resources while imposing harsh laws and taxes, ruling and taking over lands and killing or enslaving anybody who stood against them. If you didn't like the rules, tough. You couldn't vote, as it didn't even exist. And the concentration of money and power in the hands of the few often led to collapses of entire empires, causing everyone, rich and poor, to suffer. Like the Roman Empire, one of the largest empires ever, where corruption and inequality slowly tore it down. This has happened over and over again, and will most likely continue. I say all of this to make a point that if you were to go back and trade places with any of your ancestors, it would almost certainly be a drastic downgrade across the board. Yet during every second, every moment, one of our ancestors had to be there and fought to make it to the next day, to live on for us. And whether the problems came from outside the walls or within, they were constant and never ending. But the reason we're still standing here today is because we developed abstractions. Abstractions are one of those things that most people don't really think about. Like, there's so many things that we do and have that aren't real and aren't grounded in anything, but are things that have just been repeated enough times to feel like they're true. Because it's not that abstractions aren't real per se. They're just ideas that only exist in the minds of other humans. One of, if not the most powerful abstraction, is the one we're both using right this second. Language. The ability to use complex language is what set us apart from other species in the past, like the Neanderthals. Because think about it. Like, what can you really do without communication? Language allows us to communicate abstract ideas, share knowledge, and retain information throughout generations. And writing, a natural extension to language, allows us to store these ideas and spread them more easily. Almost everything we have today is because of language. Without language, we are simply nothing. Humans are weird, because we seem to be the only creatures who search for meaning. In the past, we could never understand why the unpredictable world was unpredictable. It couldn't all be for no reason. It needs a purpose. So we created religion. A belief system in gods, spirits, and supernatural forces didn't just help explain the unexplainable, but provided moral guidance. Religion gave us stories, rituals, and rules to live by. And getting large groups of people to believe in one shared purpose created trust. Because it's much easier to trust somebody if they believe in the same God as you. As we continue to grow, so did the need for trading. In the beginning, we used the barter system, trading goods and services directly based off of our personal value to them. As in, if I had berries and you had cheese, I could give you my berries for some of your cheese. But what happens if I want your cheese, but you already have enough berries for winter? Or I have to give you an entire cow for a coat, causing my family to go hungry. As time went on, the barter system simply wasn't going to cut it. So we created money, an abstract foundation of value, which only works because we all agree to follow the rules. This led to different economies and different systems like capitalism, which is still being used today. And with more and more people living out their lives, we needed to have some ground rules and regulations to maintain order, resolve disputes, and protect people on an individual level. These abstract rules that we follow are called laws. To know what laws shouldn't or shouldn't be allowed, we created different systems to make them. In some societies, we had leaders or monarchs make up the rules. In other, we had the people vote to make sure the rules were fair for all. Laws made the towns and communities overall much safer than they would be without them. They're still not perfect, but without them, there would be pure chaos. And now that we have a lot more stability, we now had more time than ever to focus on things outside of just survival. We began to express our ideas, emotions, beliefs, and try to capture the indescribable experience of being human through the timeless beauty that is art. Art is not only the most beautiful abstraction, but is also one of the most powerful. It connects people more deeply than anything else. It not only enhances the human experience, but defines it in ways nothing else truly can. Without music, life would be a mistake. And also with this free time, we began questioning the world. Like, what is this? How does this work? Why does this happen? Why do these rocks make this sound when I slap them together? To help us answer these questions, we created a second language of numbers to explain and model the natural world. We'll call this math. Math gave us the tools to solve problems that were impossible without it, allowing us to slowly understand the rules of the universe and bend them to our will, which also led to science. Instead of only using myths and stories to explain the world, we began to explain it through observation, experimentation, reason, and looking for evidence. This simple but obvious way of thinking changed everything, which we'll go into in a second. While math and science helped explain the how of the world, some people had way too much time on their hands and asked the most question of questions. Why? Why are we here? What comes after this? Is there a better way to live life? What does better even mean? And why that? Philosophy opened up Pandora's box, exposing man's ignorance on our purpose in the universe, and forced us to stare into the void, yelling questions that never receive answers, and to grapple with the mystery of existence and what we do after beating the game of survival. One thing I find extremely interesting about us is how stubborn we are, that despite all the shit we had to go through, we kept moving forward, that we thrive on struggle. Because with struggle comes revolution. 8,000 years ago was the urban revolution. We started building the first cities and transitioned from nomadic living to organized societies. This was the beginning of complex civilizations. 5,000 years ago was the Bronze Age. We began harvesting the earth for its materials, like copper, tin, and bronze, which led to the rise of empires, like in Mesopotamia and Egypt, who then invented the writing system of hieroglyphics and started the beginning of recorded history. 2,500 years ago was the Axial Age, when we saw the spread of religion and philosophy. This is when we see the rise of minds like Confucius, Socrates, Buddha, and symbols like Jesus, which led to Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, and Stoicism. 500 years ago, our eyes opened. During the scientific revolution, thinkers like Copernicus, Galileo, and Sir Isaac Newton started to poke holes in traditional beliefs we had about the universe and laid the foundation for modern physics, astronomy, biology, and chemistry. We discovered that we weren't the center of the universe. Not even close. At first we thought we were the center of everything, and then the sun was. And then we looked out in deep space and realized those aren't just stars, but other galaxies. We aren't big at all. Even small doesn't fully describe us. We're closer to nothing than something. We learned that we aren't even dust, but dust to the dust to the dust. That we're all just small creatures on a small wet planet, orbiting an average star that's one of 100 billion in our galaxy, that's only one of trillions in a possibly infinite universe. And the universe is expanding faster and faster, and we don't know why. Though there are some parts of the universe that we'll never reach, or let alone see, because the space between us and the light is somehow expanding faster than light. The real universe could be a septillion to the septillion times bigger, and somewhere in the middle of all of this, we're just here, alone. We are all we have. Anyways, but this period and the birth of curiosity also started us on the path towards modern technology that would one day give us the powers of the gods we once worshipped. 300 years ago, we were enlightened. We took this scientific approach not only to the natural world, but the way the world was run by other humans. Ideas of liberty, equality, and freedom sparked revolutions like the French and American Revolution, which would impact the rights of individuals for all time. 250 years ago was the Industrial Revolution. We learned how to harness the power of machines in factories and manufactured the age of mass production. Inventions like the steam engine and railways led to better transportation of people and goods and created global economies, allowing us to enter the modern world. 122 years ago, we took flight and began our ascent into the heavens. In 1903, the Wright brothers were the first to build and fly the first airplane, pioneering air travel and eventually space exploration. 110 years ago, the first of the world wars started, claiming the lives of over 100 million human beings over 30 years. These wars showed the darkest and lightest sides of humanity. They showed how much more we had to learn and revealed that our greatest threat was still ourselves. And on July 16th, 1945, 80 years ago, the Trinity test marked the detonation of the first atomic bomb. For the first time in our history, we were now capable of the extinction of everything we've ever built within minutes. With the push of a button, we now had the power of a god. 70 years ago, we entered the digital revolution. Alan Turing's work led to the first modern computer, which led to arguably humanity's greatest invention, the internet, quickly changing every aspect of our lives, which would in time give humans instant access to the world's information. And 56 years ago, only 66 years after the first airplane, Neil Armstrong became the first of us Homo sapiens to step foot on another celestial body, showing man's undying commitment to explore and become more, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And that brings us to today. Now, The information age. When you can sit here on a device more powerful than the one that took us to the moon and listen to another monkey across the world tell you the history on how you got to this exact moment. Wherever you are in the world, this is how you got to be here. How we became the most dominant species in the history of this planet. We live in the most unpredictable time in history. The past has already been written, but the future is not guaranteed. If we're not careful, we could ruin everything we've built at any moment. We don't know what humanity will be like in the future, as more than likely we'll never see it. But isn't it interesting living in a time where we can experience the exponential curve of humanity? A time when we've outpaced nature, outpaced our minds, and are rushing towards an age that we might not be ready for? We are slowly becoming gods with the mind of a monkey. Let's just hope it wasn't a mistake. You know, it's interesting that despite how terrible the world is, the mass extinctions, the natural disasters, death around every corner, and how bad humans can be towards each other, we've somehow been able to keep it together long enough to get here. Through it all, even in our darkest chapters, throughout all history, there were glimpses of beauty, hope, and peace. Families spent time together and told stories around fires. Kids laughed together in fields. Music echoed through towns and connected people across cultures. We even got new best friends at some point. Deep in dark caves, people created art of visual representations of the life they lived with nothing more than their hands, never knowing if eyes would ever come across them again. We looked up at the stars in the heavens and hoped we could one day touch them, questioning our position in the cosmos and what it means to be. We left our names into the stones beneath our feet, hoping at least a small piece of us could live on, hoping that those who come after us could catch a glimpse into the soul and the spirit of the humans who came before them. Sometimes I wonder what went through the mind of those who came before us, what they thought about the past, present, and future, if they had any idea of the world we would build because of the work they did, if they ever felt lost, hopeless, or sad, or if they felt the warm euphoria move through their body as they heard their favorite melody from their favorite song, if they looked up at the moon and wondered what it was like to be up there, if they could even comprehend the fact that their ancestors would walk up there the same way they walk on a beach shore, if they ever felt the sorrow of knowing their names and projects will be forgotten, not knowing what any of this is for, the feeling of living every second but never knowing if we're truly living right, the same fears we have today. If only they could be here now to see the results of their sacrifices, to see the world they've built, what we've become. I sometimes feel a strange connection with those in the past, knowing that even though we're living in a different moment in time and space, they live within me, that I literally couldn't be here without them. In a way, they never truly died, as they're looking back at themselves right now through my eyes, forever eternal. It makes me wonder about the future, when I'm gone, when my work is gone, when this video is gone, when my name is no longer even a memory, when my bones have decomposed and become fertilizer to feed whatever comes after us. Will a small piece of me still live on, like our ancestors within us? Will I one day look at myself through the eyes of a future human 1,000 years from now? Will I open my eyes once more and remember existence one final time before it's lost for the rest of eternity? Humans have the strange ability to think of the abstract. It's both a blessing and a curse. It's allowed us to get this far, but it also allows you to think into the past and future. And if we think too far into the future, we reach the inevitable black barrier that is death. And some of us freeze. It can get fixated on always looking ahead, that we forget who and what we are now. We can sometimes forget that we are 13.8 billion years old, that we are the combination of billions of years of stardust coming together in just the right way, that every atom in our bodies came from the core of an exploding star, that we are the part of the universe that has decided to look up and admire itself. We are dust that woke up, molecules that know we are molecules. We are the product of a long, unbroken chain of life, dating back to the first human to tame fire, to the first primates who swung from trees, to the first creature to step on land, from the first life form at the bottom of Earth's boiling oceans billions of years ago. They all live within you, coded into every fiber of your DNA. If you take a second and think about how many things had to go just right for you to be here. All it took was another asteroid hitting the Earth, a little virus getting into one of your ancestors at the wrong time, a twist of an ankle, and you wouldn't exist. Think about how many things had to happen just for you to be able to take your next breath, and that one day you will take your last and never again experience what it's like to be the most complex thing the universe has ever created. Maybe if you knew that, you might not care so much about small shit. You might realize you don't have time to waste. You might get the urge to get the most out of your existence, even if it'll all end sooner rather than later. 13 billion years it took to make you, but you only have 75, if you're lucky, to see what you can do, to explore, taste, create, learn, love, experience the miracle of existence. Right now, literally right now, you are living in the best time in history thus far, with potential to do things your ancestors could only dream of. Yes, one day we will be gone. And yes, we may be forgotten like the billions before us, but until that time comes, we will keep moving forward. We won't just stop until we've not only conquered this planet, but the stars and beyond. We will continue. We will strive. We will rebel against the seeming meaninglessness of creation for no other reason than the pursuit itself. We won't stop until we've exhausted everything, reached the very edges of what is possible. And during the last micro instant of the universe, etched into the very fabric of reality, it will read, "Hello, we are human beings."